This is the
Five Stars
podcast.
Let me talk to you.
Hi.
So, what do you guys want to talk about? Tell me when I'm telling lies.
Thanks, guys. Back to you.
Oh, yeah. Flash flood warning, baby. Nah, it's actually not too bad. It's just very cold and very windy. I was driving home from work and I saw the death cloud hanging over me. I was like, maybe I shouldn't go work out today. Nah, I'm going to do it anyway. We're going to risk it for the biscuit. So, well, if you're hearing this, I survived. Hopefully that's a good thing. Because we got stuff to talk about on today's Friday show. Folks, you are checking out the Five Starr Wrestling Report. We are the wrestling podcast nobody knows but everybody needs. We are here on YouTube and Rumble on Mondays and Fridays to bring you a wide range of classic wrestling talk. Glad you're here to join me. Make sure you subscribe, comment, and like the show. And as always, you can check us out on YouTube or Rumble. Personal preference. I try to push Rumble as much as possible, but you know how it is. And I did not really plan out my intros this morning very well. I'm also kind of skeptical about how long my electricity is going to hold up because it is very windy outside, so you never know. A lot of idiot drivers, too. So we're going to try to get through this. If the power goes out while I'm recording, we'll try and make it work as best we can. Still got artificial light for at least another hour or so, so what do you say we dive in? Talk about some NWA World Championship Wrestling. And plenty has happened in the last week with WCW. They fired George Scott. They just held their sixth Clash event from the Superdome that did an absolutely horrible number on TBS. They fired George Scott. We had a classic 2 out of 3 falls match with Flair and Steamboat for the World Heavyweight title with a controversial finish. Did I mention they fired George Scott? Tell you what, nobody was happier about that announcement than one Jim Cornette. And for good reason. Now, when it comes to the fallout from the Clash last week, a lot of the focus in Hour 1 was directed toward the Flair Steamboat highlights. We had JR in the production studio at center stage riding solo with commentary this week. By this point, I'm pretty sure they had already pulled Magnum as the main color guy. And now it just becomes a constant round of musical chairs with NWA commentators over the next 8 months. But again, a lot of the show was geared toward highlighting the Clash event. And when it came to Flair and Steamboat, after having reviewed the 3 falls here at the studio, the big question heading into this week was, how would NWA management handle the controversy of the third fall, where Steamboat had managed to pin Flair's shoulders down from a double chicken wing hold, despite Flair having his foot under the bottom rope when Tommy Young went to count the 3. Well, bad news. Flair's getting his lawyers involved, so you know he ain't fucking around. The announcement, as per Dennis Guthrie, Flair's attorney, who I believe was an actual legal attorney that lived in Charlotte, North Carolina at the time. He was the NWA equivalent to Clarence Mason, a real authentic attorney that they actually had on camera to deliver this promo on Flair's behalf. Only difference is Clarence had much more personality than this Dennis Guthrie jabroni. In any case, Guthrie made his demands. He said that NWA needs to book a rematch with Flair and Steamboat in the next 30 days. And given the nature of Tommy Young blowing the call when he had counted Flair's shoulders down, if they fail to meet his demands, then Guthrie will issue a lawsuit to sue Jim Herd, Ted Turner, and Ricky Steamboat. He'll file a motion to have the NWA World Heavyweight title relinquished in a court of law. He'll also issue an order to have the court pay for money damages against WCW. Looking back, I have no idea what that was supposed to insinuate. Money damages against WCW? Are those like reparations? Why the hell doesn't every heel hire a legal representative to sue wrestling organizations in that case? But most importantly, and this is obviously heavy foreshadowing as to what's to come in May at Wrestle War, Flair is requesting that there be ringside NWA representatives to witness the match in the event that any chicanery goes down. And while he didn't directly state who those representatives would be, but we know that Terry Funk ends up becoming a key figure on that panel. So, yeah, a lot of high stakes from the get-go. And I have to say, Guthrie did a tremendous job reading off that obvious cue card he had down by his crotch. If I didn't know any better, I'd have figured he rehearsed that at least 7 times beforehand. But that is where things are at with the Flair Steamboat feud. Man, I really miss the days when heels used to bend rules and hire legal attorneys to try to twist the company's arm into making decisions. Nowadays, the heels just gripe, bitch, and moan and look like bumbling idiots all the damn time. Anyway, moving on to other items of business this week. After JR did a couple live event plugs for the Connecticut area, making sure to say hi to all the great fans in the Stamford area. It was so on the nose. We got a lot of fans in the Stamford area. Can't wait to see you guys soon. Wink, wink, nod, nod. It's not the only thing going on in Stamford, JR. You got plenty more than just ordinary wrestling fans up that way. But then he turned the focus over to Lex Luger and Jack Victory from The Clash. Remember, this ended up airing as a dark match on the card. It was for the U.S. Heavyweight title. And of course, now that Jack Victory is Secret Service Agent Jack Victory, they got him out there wrestling in this giant fucking tracksuit. Had to be the most uncomfortable get-up to wrestle in. He looked like a giant green beached whale out there. So he's out there totally blown up and probably contemplating life at the moment. Meanwhile, Luger beat the shit out of him and then put him in the torture rack for the win. And they still got him beefing with Michael Hayes, which became more prevalent in the following tape they aired from Center Stage. The match is Luger versus Kendall Windham. And Hayes was on color talking smack the whole time on Luger. Couple things I noted here. In addition to this being our first look at NWA inside Center Stage, I believe this is our first time seeing Nick Patrick referee, right? I don't think he ever called any matches at the old studio on Techwood Drive. If only the people knew the reputation Patrick would have in about 10 years' time. All the people that used to chant, "You screwed Brett" at Earl Hebner. If only they knew how badly Nick Patrick would wind up fucking over Sting. And not in a worked way either. I'm talking as a shoot. I think most people out there are well aware that Nick Patrick was the son of Jody Hamilton. If you didn't, well, now you do. He did actually train as a wrestler very early in his career. That's why when you look back at old matches he refereed from WCW in the late 80s and 90s, he was sometimes just as big as the actual talent. I think it was when he went to work for the WWE in the early 2000s when he looked a lot smaller on camera, having not trained intensely for all those years. I forget why he had to retire from wrestling as early as he did. Wasn't it some kind of really fatal injury? I mean, I don't think he even wrestled a full year before he had to transition into being a ref. I just remember that run he had in like 96 or 97 when he was the heel referee for the NWO. And he was always finding ways to screw over the baby faces to help the heels win. He cut some really great promos too. That stern, low-down scumbag official that he knew was purposely fucking over all the good guys. But he was always talking about being a straight shooter and calling everything down the middle. People don't remember that Nick Patrick was a really solid promo back in the day. Even in post-retirement. Not to try to make this whole conversation about Nick. I mean, Luger and Wyndham here was fine. There was one spot where Luger tried to catch Kendall and then deadlift him up into a press slam position. But he couldn't quite get Kendall overhead. So he just draped him throat first over the ring ropes. Then he just shot him off again and hit the press slam the second time around. And after Hayes spent several minutes shit-talking Luger at the commentary table, he tried to run over to distract Luger and cost them. But then Kendall got cocky, and he went up top for a big cross-body attempt. And Luger turned it into a power slam and got the 1-2-3. So they're obviously transitioning away from the Barry Windham Lex Luger stuff and moving on to the feud with him and Hayes. Considering Barry wasn't a part of this segment here, I'm assuming he was gone from the company by now. And then we came back after break for Shane Douglas versus Bob Orton Jr. So I was wrong, apparently. That Bob Orton-Dick Murdoch match from the Clash event that didn't air. Apparently that wasn't the only appearance from Bob Orton in the NWA in 1989. Gotta love George Scott being stuck in the 70s. It's the Iron Sheik principle all over again. Hey, this guy was a big star in the previous decade. Surely people will pay tickets to see Bob Orton wrestle in 1989, right? Right on, George. You are a shrewd businessman. Don't ask me why in the hell he was being managed by Gary Hart. I got no clue. I'm still stuck trying to figure out why Bob Orton was randomly working for WCW in '89. Other than George Scott liked himself some old-time wrestling. All the while you got pre-dynamic dude Shane Douglas in here, making his return to the NWA after some time off. I mean, it's a very technically sound wrestling match. It was a cold TV match, so there wasn't any kind of backstory to it. But it was pretty fun. I actually kind of like the dynamics of babyface in peril Shane Douglas working with the more grizzled old vet Bob Orton. Made for some fun spots here. And the crowd really got into Shane by the end. God, it is so crazy when you go back and see old footage of Bob Orton. Like, physically, he doesn't look all that imposing. I mean, he was a very large guy, but he never really had much of a discernible physique. Fuck, that guy was strong. There was a spot here where he just picked Shane up into a one-handed overhead press slam and just kind of held him there for a second. Made it look so easy. Now, granted, Shane wasn't a huge guy himself. Still. And that's really impressive when you look at Bob physically. And again, they just kept it really simple with Orton overpowering Shane. Shane did a nice job selling and getting the people to rally behind him. He made a nice, crisp little comeback, and when he tried to go up top for a big high-risk move, Orton cut him off and hit the superplex and got the 3. It went a while, too. I mean, I didn't sit here with a stopwatch and time the whole thing, but they gave it some time. And it ended up turning into a really fun television match. I just wish I had any distinct memories about Cowboy Bob's run in WCW in '89. Because I'm drawing a blank right now. Without me looking anything up on Wikipedia. Trying to remember if it kind of turns into an Iron Sheik situation where he's there for a bit and then one day he just randomly disappears and we never hear from him again. I know that happened with a lot of guys around this time. But we'll see. It was sure as hell better than the bullshit that followed. Can someone answer me this, please? What did anybody find remotely interesting about the Danger Zone? Maybe I'm just exaggerating. It seems like these Paul Lee interview segments are getting progressively worse. Almost as if they have no clear-cut idea of what they want to do with it. It's just something that resembles an idea that the WWF would have done around this time. And because Jim Herd was obsessed with being WWF light, this is the kind of low-budget crap that WCW was putting on television. And I say this as somebody who actually liked Paul Heyman growing up, to a degree. I mean, I hated his bullshit ECW promotion, but I have no qualms with the guy personally. Even if he does look like a bloated up penguin who's been floating in the river for 3 days. So he brings out Sting for his special guest. And Sting's obviously the new television champion for those keeping track. So Paul was making a lot of snide congratulatory comments about Sting being the new champ. But with that comes a whole new line of responsibility that he doesn't think Sting's mature enough to handle. Since apparently he just thinks that Sting's a juvenile beach bum from California. And so they basically spend like 3 minutes doing really bad slapstick comedy where Sting comes out and screams in Paulie's face, scares him by running around the set a few times. And then Paul started talking about how angry New Yorkers are, and if Sting crossed him the wrong way, he'd show him how real New Yorkers handle business. So Sting just grabbed him on the nose and smacked him. All of a sudden, Paulie turned into Curly Howard, which is probably the fairest comparison amongst any of the Stooges. I kid you not. That was basically the whole segment. Sting came out to spoof Paulie. He talked in a really bad surfer accent, made some dumb jokes. Then he grabbed Paulie by the honker and made him look like a goofball. The only thing we needed was David Crockett going, "He's got him by the honker. Look at him." And that would have been the equivalent to the 1989 version of Jimmy Valiant interacting with Paul Jones's Army. Terribly bad comedy that just makes you shake your head and question what the hell you're even watching. Speaking of me questioning what I'm watching, rewatching the highlights of that U.S. Tag title match from the Clash the other week, the Rick Steiner, Eddie Gilbert versus Kevin Sullivan, Dan Spivey tag, I'm starting to question if I wasn't harsh enough on how truly bad that match was. Even in just watching the final 30 seconds. God, what a clusterfuck. And yeah, I was mostly paying attention to Dan Spivey. The walking botch machine that guy was. I had to start calling him Dan Franken-Spivey. I still don't understand the whole thing of the babyfaces having to cheat to use Missy Hyatt's Gucci bag to retain the belts. But judging how things are about to go down with Missy and the Steiners over the next several months, perhaps there's more to the story than I'm either misremembering or completely forgetting altogether. Now, we did have Rick Steiner going over into squash at center stage with Paul Brown. And while Missy was out there cheerleading him on, there was no sign of Eddie Gilbert. Apparently, he was still selling after having been laid out by the Varsity Club after last week's title match. And, I mean, not to try to read too much into it, but I was watching the way Missy was cheering Rick on here. She had that lusty look in her eyes, if you know what I mean. I think Eddie might have lit the fuel a little too close to the fire here. Something suspicious going on with Rick Steiner and Missy Hyatt. Ain't no such thing as a male-female mutual platonic friendship. Never forget that. I'll debate anybody on that topic. And from there, we switch gears to the other sets of tag belts. This is the match they didn't air the other week. And looking back, I'm not entirely sure why. Judging how it was probably the most intriguing of all the finishes to the Clash event last week, outside the 2 out of 3 falls. It's the Road Warriors defending the World Tag Belts against Mike Rotunda and Dr. Death. And what we basically had here was Teddy Long pulling a Nick Patrick approximately 10 years before the Nick Patrick fast count screw job. I mean, how ironic that we literally just talked about Nick Patrick earlier on. And then in the same show, we got Teddy Long pulling a legitimate fast count and fucking over the babyfaces. So here's the deal. We go to the closing minutes of the match where Animal goes to break up a pin attempt from Rotunda. And while Teddy's trying to grab Animal and get him back to his corner, Animal kind of shoves Teddy away and sends him flying into the corner. And while, yeah, you can argue that it was an uncalled for tactic by the Road Warriors, it's also not entirely something you wouldn't expect Hawk or Animal to do. And so when the Road Warriors go to hit their Doomsday device on Rotunda to cover him for the 3, Teddy's standing in the corner favoring his back while verbally eviscerating the babyfaces. In the distraction led to Rotunda stacking up Hawk. Teddy ran over to count Hawk's shoulders down with a very rapid 3 count. And unlike Nick Patrick, who was supposed to do a fast count during the Hogan Sting match, but ended up just counting a regular 3 anyway and fucked the whole thing up 6 ways from Sunday, Teddy did an actual legit fast count correctly. And so not only did Teddy turn heel and potentially sabotage his referee license, But the Varsity Club walked away as the new World Tag Team Champions. One of the very rare times we ever saw the Road Warriors do a job. And for the record, yes, I am aware that they're about to transition Teddy away from being a referee and put him in a manager role. Although I am interested to see how they go about explaining that whole thing on television, considering this type of action could be classified as a fireable offense. Knowing WCW, they'll probably just gloss over it, not expecting anybody to ask questions. And the Road Warriors did their little tangent promo afterwards, saying that was the biggest load of horse crap they've ever seen. And the next time they see Teddy Long or the Varsity Club, they'll make sure they get their receipt. You could just tell the amount of effort it took for these guys not to drop F-bombs. They were holding back so much. A lot of self-censoring going on here. I'm surprised they didn't try to cut the feed and say, you know what? Let's not even open that can of worms. But that was that. And then it was right back to center stage to see the Road Warriors decimate a couple job guys. One of whom I believe was Keith Steinborn. The other guy, I can never remember his name. His last name's Brown. For some reason, I want to say Dave Brown, but I don't think that's right. In any case, they got killed in a minute. And when we get back from commercial, they literally duplicated the exact same squash match, but this time with Dr. Death and Mike Rotunda. They came out, demolished two job guys in very quick succession, and somehow I believe we were supposed to boo these two, even though they did the exact same thing the babyfaces just did in the previous segment. Oh, by the way, this is how little WCW was paying attention to detail with airing their tapings around this point. That job guy with the last name Brown that I just talked about, the one from the previous match that we just saw get beaten up by the Road Warriors, well, he was right back out here in the very next segment. In the exact same ring gear, no less. At least Crockett knew what weeks to air their taping, so we didn't see the same job guys appear on the same fucking program. These people couldn't even keep that straight. Rotunda got the win with the butterfly suplex. And that brought us back to the Clash, where we got to see the dark match with Sting defending the TV title against Rip Morgan. And this was, quite clunky, albeit a short match. I don't know what happened here. I don't know if Sting just had trouble working with a guy who did virtually everything left-handed, but he did not look good in this match. By that token, neither did Rip Morgan. He tried to kick Sting in the face at one point, just fell on top of Sting's leg. But Sting hit the corner splash, Scorpion Deathlock for the submission. Probably the one time you'll actually hear me say, this is a title match that arguably should have been a dark match. Because it was ugly. Almost as ugly as that Dan Spivey match. But circling back to the NWA World Title discussion, we had heard from JR at the top of the show that Jim Herd was going to be on camera to make an announcement regarding that match. And in follow-up to Ric Flair's attorney making idle threats about potentially suing the NWA if he doesn't get a fair rematch for the title. Well, we get Jim Herd at the studio to... Well, this is actually kind of funny. Here's basically what happened. He said, I personally don't care what Ric Flair or his attorneys have to say about the matter. So with that in mind, there will be a rematch for the world title, and there will be a panel of NWA representatives at ringside to watch the match to make sure nothing deceptive happens. So, in essence, he gave in to Flair's demands, even though he directly said that he does not care about Flair's demands. Jim Herd in a nutshell, people. He was not the brightest bulb in the drawer, nor was he a very fluid talker on camera, which is probably why we didn't see it all that often. By the way, sidebar, did you know Jim Herd is still alive to this day? He didn't look a day over 75 at this point. My God. Father Time knows how to punish people. So yeah, it is official for May the 7th, Wrestle War. There will be a third and final showdown with Flair and Steamboat for the World Heavyweight title. And there will also be a series of NWA reps at ringside to ensure a fair, clean fight. And or that no bad officiating goes down. Since apparently all the NWA referees decided to go rogue here in the spring of 1989. And then we head right back to center stage for Randy Rose and Jack Victory. After we learned that the NWA hired Randy Rose back following the Chi-Town Rumble where he dropped the fall in the Midnight vs. Midnight match, as well as learning that Paulie didn't want anything to do with him in terms of being his manager anymore. Well, Randy Rose is back, and he's just kind of a dude on the roster right now. Yeah, granted, the people like seeing him run wild on Jack Victory here, beating him up with a leather belt and chasing after Paul on the floor. But let's be honest, it's not like they were ever going to push Randy as a top babyface, especially as a singles guy. And without Dennis Condrey as his partner, he was doomed to fail on his own. And it's not to say he was a bad worker, just not the kind of guy you ever saw as anything other than a middle-of-the-card talent for the NWA. So he's out there working a pretty basic match with Victory. There's a little bit of heat from Jack Victory in the middle after he dodged a corner charge. Then it led to the finish where Randy Rose hit a really jacked-up-looking skull-crushing finale near the ropes. And as he went to pin Jack, Paulie ran over and smashed his phone over Rose's head. And that way Victory could drape an arm over Randy's dead body for the pin. Pretty clever little heat finish. Although I'm not entirely sure this is what you wanted to see after Randy Rose came back from being fired. Literally to get punked out immediately by Paulie and Jack Victory during a talk show segment. And now here he is dropping a pinfall to Jack Victory on TV. This is not what you would call ideal booking when you're trying to reestablish somebody who is already having a hard time getting over with the audience his first time around. But what do I know? I never booked a day in my life. I've just covered incompetent booking for the better part of 30 years. Back to the Superdome for more footage. They aired the Bob Orton, Dick Murdoch 30-second squash that I joked about last week, where I said they were so pressed for airtime, they had to cut the 30-second match with Bob Orton going over Dickie. Couldn't make room to air that. But we did get to see a terrible Varsity Club versus Gilbert Steiner match with a really clunky finish. So here's everything that went down. Murdoch went to pick up Orton for the brainbuster. You could tell he was slightly out of position when Gary Hart tried to reach in to swipe Murdoch's foot out, because he saw Gary try not to be so explicit about it, knowing Tom Young was standing like 5 feet to his right the whole time. But he managed to trip up Murdoch so Orton could fall on top and get the 3. That was pretty much it. Apparently these guys are going to do a rematch at some point, from what I heard JR say. I presume it's got to be some kind of stipulation match. Find it hard to believe that Gary Hart would sign off on being put in a shark cage. But we'll see. This is a very 1970s feud. And another moment relived in 1989 where I sit back and say, Dick Murdoch and Bob Orton feuded on WCW in 1989? Sure did. And I don't recall a single bit of it. And from there we pitched back to center stage where we saw the Great Muta beating up 2 jobbers in a handicap match. I yet again have to remind everybody that Muta is supposed to be a heel. Meanwhile, he's in there manhandling 2 job guys like a total badass. Boo. Yeah, not totally hateable qualities. So he destroyed these 2 and wound up going over with a moonsault. We also did get confirmation from Jim Ross. He is now being referred to as the Great Muta. So they've officially dropped the Mota name. I just love the idea that they refuse to ever let this guy have a real run as a babyface, despite everyone giving them every indication that they did not want to hate Muta. This is one of the most dire examples of WCW deliberately going against the grain with babyface heel personas. And it's not like they were ever going to do anything to thwart the people from cheering them. Hey, I got a brilliant idea. Instead of having Muta squash 1 guy, let's have him squash 2 guys. That'll get him under people's skin. Like fucking flies to manure, man. They just gravitated toward him that much more. And, well, to close out the show, we had some final comments from Steamboat and Flair regarding the World Heavyweight title. Now knowing that they're going to wrestle one final time in Nashville, it is the put up or shut up match, which is kind of what Steamboat inferred in this promo. He said that Flair has a valid case for getting a rematch. It was not as clear-cut as Steamboat had initially thought, now having seen the footage of the 2 out of 3 falls. However, this has to be Flair's final opportunity, because Steamboat has many other opponents that would like a crack at the gold, and Steamboat has to honor those other challenges. It was a very boring paint-by-numbers Ricky Steamboat babyface promo. And then there's Flair, who just completely outclasses Steamboat on the stick in every way imaginable. He says that he went through all the trouble of getting his personal lawyers involved just to ensure that he would get a fair shake. He understands it's his last shot. And when you're someone the caliber of a Ric Flair who rides and dines on money, looks, and beautiful women, The fuel to the fire is the NWA World's Heavyweight title. So Ric Flair needs to win the belt back in order to further his career and cement his legacy as a 6-time champion. And it's all obviously great delivery. The only thing I kept wondering the whole time he was talking, and they had a close-up on him so it was easy to tell, was Flair sucking on Laffy Taffy before he did this promo? His tongue was so red. Am I the only one that noticed it? Implying people have ever actually seen this pre-tape and even know what the hell I'm talking about. That was the only thing I could look at the entire time. Flair's fucking red-ass tongue. Like, did he accidentally bite his lip or something and start gushing? Because we've seen Flair bust his lip open during promo segments before. Literally just by screaming like a maniac. I don't think that happened here. I think he may have just had a glass of cranberry juice before he started talking. Anyhow, that was the show. Really not a very riveting episode. Despite getting our first look at Center Stage and seeing the new format and the new production features. I mean, everything looked nice on camera. I like the balance here with JR at the studio versus the actual in-ring content they aired this week. But overall, it was just a show that really didn't have a whole lot going on outside the Flair Steamboat stuff. And I noticed over the next month or so of television, they're going to be doing a lot of 1-hour taping blocks. And I know that when we get into July, the syndicated programming is going to be taking a very different direction. I can't explicitly remember how it goes, but I'm pretty sure WCW Saturday Night ends up taking over as the primary Saturday show by midsummer. Which basically means I'm going to have to start watching the Saturday night shows on YouTube, because I don't think Peacock has any of the Saturday night tapings up before like 1993. At least I don't think. But I know there's a lot of that archived Saturday night footage on YouTube somewhere. And I think it's all original too. I'll have to do some exploring and see what I can find. But yeah, drastic changes with WCW in '89. It's kind of hard to wrap my head around all of it, but we are officially at Center Stage. I say this as if it's a new kind of regime. It's really not. But that is where we're at. And we'll pick up on things next week. So, after last week's episode of Midsouth Television, where I believe the sum total of in-ring action ranged somewhere in the ballpark of 120 seconds, well, this week was back to being very wrestling heavy. And I'm obviously being somewhat flippant. Last week was a great episode. But it was all pretty much delegated to pushing the last Stampede showdown with Bill Watts and Stagger Lee versus the Midnight Express. Everything else was kind of secondary. This week was kind of return to form, with focusing a lot more on the ring action at the Irish McNeil Boys Club. And we dived right into things this week with Mr. Wrestling taking on Joe Savoli. We did learn the other week that Mr. Wrestling no longer wants to be referred to as Mr. Wrestling 2. He is the North American champion now. In his book, he's always been number 1. Therefore, he's legally changing his name to Mr. Wrestling. Just like how Nikolai Volkov legally changed Darso's name from Crusher Darso to Crusher Khrushchev. No government paperwork needed. It's a simple little get-over match. A couple awkward moments where Mr. Wrestling and Savoldi weren't quite on the same page with communicating spots. But overall, it was fine. It's weird now that I can't just abbreviate Mr. Wrestling with 2. So now I'm almost obligated to start calling him Mr. Wrestling, even in short. Because if I write just wrestling, it's too generic. And I can't just say Mr. because that's also way too generic. In any case, Mr. Wrestling fired back on Savoldi, gave him a clunky looking back body drop, which wasn't really a backdrop to begin with. Then he hit his running knee lift for the pin. Now, last episode we saw him and Magnum TA almost work an impromptu match, but then Wrestling backed down like a coward. Now that Magnum's actually standing up for himself and showing signs of aggression that Mr. Wrestling wasn't expecting, well, now is the point where he's too afraid to lock horns with Magnum. But they still got that program stewing. It's kind of sad to think it's almost playing second fiddle to what's going on with Watts and the Midnights. But that feud is so white hot right now. If you really think about it, the North American title program is almost being viewed as the underneath program. Not necessarily bottom of the card. More like semi-main. In any case, we do come back for the Midnight Express taking on Mike Jackson and Jeff Young. I believe this is the first time I recall ever seeing beautiful Bobby Eaton wrestle in all-white gear. Thank God that look didn't stick. All-white anything is never a good look, regardless of who's wearing the gear. It exposes a lot more than you might think. As we all know, anytime the Midnights get to work with Mike Jackson, it's like a kid in a candy store. I mean, for Bobby Eaton in particular, it was almost considered a night off. He and Jackson were just nearly perfect working together. All those matches we covered on the TBS syndicated shows when Bobby would bump his ass off for Jackson, they'd be in there calling spots and working their butts off. If they'd have booked an entire 2-hour show with Bobby Eaton versus Mike Jackson, I'd have watched it in a heartbeat. And of course, as usually is the case with Jackson teaming with a lesser-known guy, Jackson's usually the one getting some offense on Bobby and Dennis, or sometimes Bobby and Stan, until the other guy tags in. And the Midnights immediately shit-can him and start getting the heat. So they beat up on Young for a while until Jackson got a tag and hit a few drop kicks on the Midnights. Then Bobby cut him off with a pass and got him in position for Dennis so they could hit the Gravedigger and get the pin. Good stuff. Really easy match. It was fun. Other than beautiful Bobby in all white gear, I had nothing to complain about with this segment. And that brought us to Terry Taylor versus John King. I do need to make a brief correction here. I royally fucked up on last week's review when we were recapping the fallout to the Terry Taylor Butch Reed TV title round. So what happened was, they shot the angle where Taylor had rammed Butch Reed's arm into the ring post, and he came out in the very next segment with his arm in a sling, pretending to sell that Taylor had knocked his arm out of socket. And because they were originally scheduled to wrestle in the semi-final round for the tournament, Butch Reed was demanding that Midsouth postpone the match another week until he was healed. And as it turns out, Reed was faking the injury the whole time. And when he tried to blindside Taylor with the loaded glove that he had hidden under his sling, he ended up punching Taylor in the ribs a few times. Then Taylor did the foam at the mouth gimmick to sell internal damage. Now, originally I said that it looked like as if they were postponing the round even further. That actually wasn't the case at all. I missed the dialogue when JR stated that because of what Butch Reed did to Taylor in that segment, he was being withdrawn from the tournament altogether, which means the final round was going to be Taylor versus Khrushchev. So that was my bad. I don't know how I totally missed that part last week. Must have been distracted typing notes up or something and completely glossed over that critical detail. Although looking back at the show, Butch Reed did not seem very angry about it. Guess he didn't care. It is official, though. The TV title tournament finals will be Khrushchev battling Taylor for the 10 grand and the gold medal. Which brought us to this week. And what started as a very standard exhibition with him and John King kind of ended up turning into a Terry Taylor House of Fire flurry by the end. After King decided he was going to bend a few roles and play dirty here, Taylor fought back and was being rather aggressive. So he threw a stiff right at King in the corner, hit some big flashy offense on him, and then won with a flying forearm. And I believe they said next week is when we will see the finals of the tournament. So all the people that are joking it's the longest wrestling tournament in recorded history, well, it'll be over in a week. So you can stop griping. I'm not disagreeing, by the way. This has been a very excruciatingly long tournament. I think it's lasted longer than the G1. I'm still not going to look up spoilers because I am curious to see who goes over. I was initially predicting Terry Taylor to win, but I'm thinking it might actually end up being Darso that wins this tournament. I mean, you think about it too in story. Gives Taylor more of an uphill battle, chance to chase the title instead of just giving him the win outright. Because if he wins next week, where do you go from there? Gotta give the people something to root for as we head closer to New Orleans. And then we come to our featured TV bout for the week. It's the Rock and Roll Express taking on the team of Buddy Landel and Butch Reed. And what a fucking match this was. This is awesome. This is one of those under-the-radar matches in 1984 that, because there was already so much great stuff going on at the time, I think this match unfortunately gets forgotten about in the overall scope of things. I mean, I figured it was going to be a good match. I didn't think it would be this good. And no one had a better seat in the house for this than Jim Cornette. Sitting at ringside taking notes on the world's tiniest sheet of notebook paper. I was actually watching him peripherally for most of the segment. Every time I looked down, he was writing something on this little piece of scrap paper. I'm like, how small is Cornette's font? I mean, he's been writing nonstop for basically 10 minutes on this little piece of paper. Eventually, he's going to run out of room to write stuff down. Now, obviously, that wasn't the sole reason he was out there, but we'll cover the finish in a sec. This whole thing was a Ricky Morton showcase, man. If you're going through archives and you're looking for matches that spotlight Ricky Morton's selling ability and why he's such a great babyface in peril, this match, enough said. Early on, it's all Ricky and Robert on the attack. I mean, even after the heels tried to jumpstart before the bell, the Rock and Roll quickly turned it around in their favor. I mean, they just had an answer for virtually everything Buddy and Butch tried at the beginning. And the heels eventually turned it in their favor after Buddy ran a distraction and managed to leave Ricky open for Reed to drop kick him in the face. And then over the next several minutes, it's Ricky Morton selling. And these fucking Irish McNeil fans are going insane. They are screaming and begging for Ricky to tag in Robert to make the comeback. And every single time Ricky looks as though he's going to fight back and get over to his corner, the heels would do something to divert the referee's attention away, or Robert would get in the ring to try to go after the illegal heel. But all it would do is open up the door for the heels to double team Ricky some more. And they basically repeated this cycle until Robert finally had his Popeye moment. And he gets in the ring and starts going after Buddy. Then they do this spot where Buddy shoots Robert off into the ropes. And then he takes that classic Gibson bump where Cornette pulls the top rope down and Robert spills over the top and goes ass over tea kettle to the concrete. Sells it like he's dead. And as Ricky gets an ear fall and a small package on Buddy, Butch Reed is off in the corner loading up his fist with a gimmick. It leads to a great sequence where Butch Reed leapfrogs Ricky Morton, and Butch Reed pops Morton in the face as Buddy had the ref distracted. 1, 2, 3. The heels get the win over the Rock and Roll. What a match. What a performance. Just overall a must-see television match. I continue to maintain the most underrated tag team of all time. Hacksaw, Butch Reed, and Nature Boy Buddy Landel, man. What a pairing. Those two were phenomenal together. The perfect set of cocky douchebag heels that just fit like a glove. Couldn't have picked a better team. You know, and keep in mind, too, the Rock and Roll are still technically immersed in a program with the Russians right now, even though they weren't the central focus to all this. But this is how you do layered storylines and present more options for live events and house shows, just to keep it all fresh. I mean, now you're giving the Rock and Roll 2 other programs coming out of this. You get the rematch with Landel and Reed. Then there's a fallout to whatever they're about to do with Midnight and Rock and Roll. And this is all well constructed and remarkably thought out. And you can logically see how they're getting from point A to point B, etc. It's not a spotted clusterfuck graph where you're trying to connect dots that don't make any sense to begin with. On the topic of the Russians, well, we found out who the mystery third Russian is. His name is the Russian Invader. Lot of thought put into that one. I really underestimated just how huge the guy was. He almost dwarfed Hacksaw Duggan here. Problem was, last week he was part of that melee with Volkov and Darso, and I mean, those two are huge themselves. Duggan was a big guy, too. And of course, we all knew Duggan was going over here, which makes the whole third Russian story that much funnier. You know, the fact that he showed up in that mass beatdown last week, then 7 days later they just feed him to Duggan in a 2-minute TV squash. No wonder I forgot about him. He probably lasted less time than Kendo Nagasaki did. Who? Exactly. He got like 30 seconds of heat on Duggan. Then Duggan fired back and hit him with a spear for the 3. Great pick from the Russians. Really found themselves a suitable extra hand to help fight their battles for them. The Russian Invader. It's hilariously 1980s. Meanwhile, Volkov and Masayo Ito come out in the very next segment and make quick work of George Weingroff and Lanny Poffo. And for those asking, why is Volkov randomly teaming with Masayo Ito and not Khrushchev? I don't know. My guess is Khrushchev was preparing for his TV title match next week. So Volkov said, let me find another evil foreigner to team with. Masayo Ito will be fine. Volkov, don't you want to team with the third Russian? Nah, Ito will be fine. Really not much to say here. Weingroff had Ito in the abdominal stretch for a bit. The ref was distracted holding back Poffo, and then Volkov snuck in the ring and kicked Weingroff in the face so Ito could hit a splash for the 3. Simple stuff. And that left us with Magnum TA getting a quick win over Bob Owens to close out the remaining airtime. Again, very short and concise. Magnum went over with the belly-to-belly. And it was a lot of belly to pick up. Bob Owens was a, shall we say, corpulent individual. But that's about it there. And they also aired a quick little highlight package of some footage from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Obviously one of the bigger markets Midsouth runs throughout the year. They really didn't have a lot of shots of inside the venue, though. There were some outside shots of the, what's it called? Is it the Centroplex? I'm never good at remembering venue names. But there was some girls' match footage. There was a clip of Taylor and Volkov. And they always got to credit Joel Watts for putting everything together. Because, well, that's nepotism for you. Hey, I'll check out the cool shit my son produced. I'm partially kidding. I always like giving Joel Watts a hard time. Just like how I love Ribbon David Crockett. Oh, trust me, I will have plenty more to say about Joel Watts. Just wait until they put him on commentary. But there you have it. Not really a standout show this week, especially in terms of storyline development. But it was really good contrast to last week's episode, which again was very story-heavy and promo-centered. This week was more dedicated to highlighting the wrestling, and ain't nothing wrong with that. We did not get a Bill Watts or a Stagger Lee appearance, but that is the big thing looming on everyone's mind. The last Stampede Showdown, and all the heinous things that Bill Watts plans to do to Jim Cornette, the no-good sissy. Can't remember, are we technically on the week of the last Stampede show, or was that all taking place next week? For some reason, the date April 7th is in my head. And that was this week's taping at the Irish McNeil Boys Club. So maybe this was the big night. Well then, hopefully we'll get some follow-up footage soon. Good stuff, man. All that crap they were doing to Cornette. Putting him in the dress, the baby diaper, shoving the bottle down his throat. What else did they do? They dressed him up in something else, too. All those stipulation matches to keep it all fresh. And I think it varied from territory to territory, depending on how close the markets were. They were doing different stipulations. It's kind of neat. Very cleverly thought out. Can't wait to see the footage follow-up. That, honest to God, may have been one of the worst transitions I've done. Moving on. World class. And before we get into anything else on this week's show, I need to talk about the unfortunate news that broke in the wrestling media over the last week. I don't know if this had happened just after I recorded the Friday show last week, which is why you didn't hear me mention anything about it. But I was sad to see that Bill Mercer died. That was really heartbreaking to hear. 99 years old. Holy cow, man. He lived a very fulfilling life, that's for sure. I mean, it's crazy when you go back and see Mercer as the ring announcer in 1986. I mean, how old was he at this point? Well, let's see, I guess I could do some mental math. Let's go to the trusty Google machine here. Bill Mercer. He was born in 1926. So he was 60. 60 years old when he was doing play-by-play commentary for World Class. 1 year before I was born. Christ on a cracker. It's almost incredible to think about. And, you know, I'm not going to sit here and say that Mercer's my all-time favorite commentator in wrestling. But he's done a remarkable job flying solo on these world-class shows as a sole commentator. I still remember back in, like, late 82, I think a little bit in early 83. I mean, they had tried the two-man commentary team with sometimes Mark Lawrence. I think Kerry or Kevin would fill in occasionally with Bill. Someone else I'm missing. But when you think of sole play-by-play commentators with no one else to interact with or bounce ideas off of, it's not as easy as you might think. Especially in terms of keeping things interesting. Trust me, I know how difficult it is doing a solo podcast and keeping people engaged. Because you constantly feel obligated to say something to make sure there's no dead space. Lord knows I cut out a lot of it. But I thought Mercer did extraordinarily well in that role. And overall, I mean, you could just tell he was a very down-to-earth kind of guy. I've heard him do interviews over the years and talk about the legacy of World Class. I was always kind of bummed that they couldn't have made him a featured part of the Triumph and Tragedy documentary. And he was such an instrumental part of World Class's growth. The fact that WWE left him off the documentary, he was such a missing piece to the puzzle, you know? But he always just came off like such a nice guy. And such a sad thing to hear. I mean, yeah, he was nearly pushing 100 in terms of lifespan on this planet. It's not like he didn't live a full, prosperous life. But that's the kind of commentary that I miss in wrestling, man. The Lance Russells, the Bob Caudles, the Bill Mercers of the world. Straight shooting radio personality type commentators that weren't always constantly screaming in your face and being loud and obnoxious all the damn time. So I just wanted to recognize Bill very briefly because he will be a voice that is greatly missed in the world of wrestling commentary. But let's go ahead and get on with the show. We opened the card this week with a one-man gang versus Mark Youngblood. I guess they were experiencing a good amount of flooding in the Dallas area around this period. Mercer was talking about how they got like 8 inches of rain in one day. And when you live in a place like Dallas, which is a fucking dry spell 364 days out of the year to begin with, it's a lot of rain. So hopefully the flooding didn't cause too much damage. Didn't seem to hurt the attendance all that much. Sportatorium looked fairly packed to me. Of course, it's a taped show, so Lord even knows when they were in the taping block when they filmed this. So Gang worked over Youngblood's arm for a lot of this. He ended up missing a corner charge, which gave Youngblood a quick chance to fire a comeback on him. Then Gang quickly shot him down and hit a backbreaker over the knee for the pin. Still have not made it entirely clear what the end goal is for the Gang heading into Texas Stadium. I mean, he just returned last week and worked a pretty short squash there as well. So, not really sure what they're planning with him yet. Last time he was in a featured TV feud, he was doing something with Percy Pringle and the Missing Link. So, I mean, as much as I'm not looking forward to the idea of him resuming that feud with Link, it seems like the most coherent option at this point. You know what wasn't coherent? Deciding to put Chris and Mike Von Erich in an angle with the Freebirds in Fort Worth. I mean, Chris, kind of goes without saying, he was, 15 or 16 at this time? I mean, having him out there interacting with Michael Hayes and Buddy Roberts, as little fighting as he actually did in this segment, visually the whole thing was ridiculous. And you knew the Freebirds couldn't legally put their hands on Chris to begin with. Elsewise, they'd be facing a lawsuit. So why the fuck even go there? Plus, Mike's there with a live microphone in front of his face, and that never results in anything good. Because Mike just wasn't a natural at this. And no matter how much they try to force it and push it on everybody, I mean, I hate to even go there because his entire story is so tragic, as is Chris's. But the bottom line is he just wasn't talented like Kevin or Kerry was. Or David, for that matter. He just didn't fit the mold of the other three brothers. And that's a harsh reality that I think a lot of people aren't comfortable talking about. But it's the truth. This whole segment was just not a good look for the company. Buddy Roberts is out there yelling at Mike and Chris. Mike can barely speak to begin with because he had no idea what he was trying to say. And poor Chris, all 5'4" of him, he's having to stand behind his brother watching as Mike's getting verbally demolished by the Freebirds. And the whole thing ends with Buddy sucker punching Mike. Chris goes out and grabs a folding chair and ends up hitting Buddy in the back with it, which Buddy had to sell for. I'm like, come on. And then finally, Kerry and all the other babyfaces run out to send the Freebirds packing. This was just a poorly thought out segment. Just bad. And not even bad in the sense of the interaction with Mike, Chris, and the Freebirds. But this was just plainly exposing the business kind of bad. Insulting your intelligence kind of bad. Chris Von Erich out there getting physical with your top heels. I mean, that should never have taken place. I don't care how the people reacted to it. Having anybody sell for Chris Von Erich is a blatant knock on the business, especially with your top guys. That's like Marco Stunt level disrespectful. I just don't know how else to describe it other than horrible. Should never have aired. And that took us back to the Sportatorium for Rick Rude versus Brickhouse Brown. Some wonderful interplay here going on with Percy Pringle and Bill Mercer. Percy yelling for Mercer to tell the Dallas fans to shut up. Mercer goes, "I'm sorry, Mr. Pringle. I cannot tell these fans to shut up. And there's a pause, and then you just hear Percy go, "Damn it!" Now, I don't know if that was in response to Mercer telling him no, or if Percy was just pissed off at the crowd, but either way, it was great comedic timing. You know what else is great comedic timing? Rick Rude asking for the official to feel around inside Brickhouse's hair for a gimmick. Not even going to go there with the racial undertones. This was just a total transparent example of how to get the most out of doing virtually nothing. I mean, the entire first half of the match is Brickhouse teasing that he was going to punch Rude in the face. And the crowd still went nuts for him. I mean, that really goes to show how quickly Brickhouse got over in Dallas. And you fast forward a bit later on, after the test of strength challenge with which Rude naturally lost. Rude gets a little bit of heat on Brickhouse until they'll come back at the end. At which point Percy tries to reach up and tease that he's going to hit Brickhouse with his walking stick. And as Brickhouse goes to yank Percy over the top rope, Rude attacks him from behind, and it looked like he just kind of clubbed him in the back of the head with his elbow and pinned him. Don't really know what was going on there, but he knocked him out cold. I mean, seriously, they barely even touched for the first half of this match. And the people are still going ballistic for everything. You know, I hate to have to do the comparisons, but it's another one of those examples of something a lot of modern guys can adapt to. Watch and learn. You know, just because you can do a million goddamn things in a match and kill yourself for no reason doesn't mean you need to. You could dive off the 20-foot ladder through a fiery table. It doesn't mean it's a good idea. I mean, nobody would ever think to show this kind of match to a group of developmental students. And that's a crime against humanity. Because there's so much to be learned in this one match. Do what you need to in order to get a reaction. But don't do more than absolutely necessary. Because sometimes you just flat out don't need to. And by that same token, don't be a Kevin Nash where you just come up with 5 moves of doom and then do the bare minimum to get by. Because that option also sucks. There is a balance. And this Rick Rude Brickhouse Brown match is a great example of doing just enough, but not overdoing it. Now all of a sudden it's kind of getting me hoping that the people vote for Brickhouse Brown to get the title shot at Texas Stadium. Maybe it will be. Still got a month before the big showdown. Anything can happen. And that brings us to the highlight of this week's show. The split-screen sit-down with Fritz Von Erich and Michael Hayes. God, this interview rolled. I went back and rewatched it the minute it was over, and it was better the second time. I mean, if anything, due to Michael Hayes' reactions when Fritz was reaming him verbally. So, just to set the stage here and explain what's going on, they're doing a call-in session between Fritz from Dallas and Michael Hayes from Atlanta. And Hayes lets us know that he bought this airtime, so he's in charge of leveraging who gets to talk and when, even though Bill Mercer's supposed to be the mediator, or I guess the moderator. I guess we should ask Scott Steiner. Nobody's going to get that joke. So, well, Hayes begins here by laying out his gripe with Fritz about the upcoming Texas Stadium 6-man. Not only is it a 6-man for the world titles, But there is now a stipulation that it will be a lumberjack elimination match. And Hayes views this as Fritz's opportunity to try to run the Freebirds out of world class. Moreover, it's him trying to leave Hayes vulnerable so everybody can gang up on him in an unfair attack. And he just goes off for several minutes about how Fritz is doing this to leverage his control. And he's talking about his punk kids. He called Mike a 90% human, which is horrible, but also kind of funny. And again, he's just going off on Fritz and talking about all the injustices that have been thrown his way, dating all the way back to the first Texas Stadium event. You know, even last year when he fucked the Freebirds out of their chances at winning the car. It is kind of crazy to think that 1 year ago the Freebirds were babyfaces in world class, fighting by the side of the Von Erichs. 12 months later, it is a totally different story. But, well, he said his piece, and then Fritz cut him off and went into demon hellhole Fritz mode. God, he just sounded frightening to talk to in person. Listening to him threaten Hayes and talk about whipping him with his leather belt sounded like a walking, breathing dragon demon. I mean, I just could not get over this dichotomy. And all the while you watch Hayes' reaction when Fritz is talking about what he's going to do to him and the Freebirds, strapping him until his ass is bloody and mangled. And Hayes is just overselling everything facially to the point where it's ridiculous. So over the top. But it was great. Then at the very end, Hayes is talking about how he bought this TV time and he's going to get the last word. Nobody's going to cut him off. Then Bill Mercer probably goes, "Folks, we need to take a break. We'll be back." And Hayes just keeps yelling into the camera. Fritz is sitting there scowling and looking like he's mentally punching a hole through Hayes' chest. Awesome. And like, I mean, was the overacting a bit preposterous at times? Sure. But did Fritz put the fear of God in everyone by the end? Sure did. I would not want to be Hayes in this situation. In or out of kayfabe. God, when Fritz is talking about how he's going to use the leather strap on Hayes the same way he used to use on his boys when they were growing up to whip them into shape. That is not the kind of man you want to chastise. It's old school, brother. Very old school. See, in my house, we got the wooden spoon. Didn't get the leather belt. Apparently, my parents weren't harsh enough on me when I was a child. That's why I turned out the way I did. In any case, main event, kind of tied in with the previous segment. It's Bruiser Brody and Kerry Von Erich taking on Michael Hayes and Terry Gordy. Before all four guys could even get in the ring, Brody and Gordy were already going at it. So it took a hot minute for them to get things under control. I liked Rick Hazard threatening to call the match off if both teams couldn't keep it under wraps. Just sounded like a dad threatening to punish his 5-year-old. If you guys can't behave, then we won't have the match. Okay, Rick. Tell that to the Dallas fans. See how they respond. But they had a match. Pretty solid back and forth where the heels got double sets of heat on Brody and Kerry. You know, the thing with Bruiser Brody, it's always interesting when I watch his matches. He wasn't a great seller it's probably accurate to say he wasn't a particularly good worker when it came to his wrestling ability. But the guy had ring presence like you would not imagine. When Bruiser Brody was involved in a match, people paid attention. And the stuff he's been doing with Gordy on television over the last few weeks, I mean, it's only been 2 or 3 weeks, but that shit's been getting a reaction like nothing else. The people love to see those two brawl. You know, it's funny too, because there really hasn't been much aside from some aisleway fighting and small use of weapons here and there. But they did a good job in this match with not giving away too much ahead of Texas Stadium, still leaving you wanting more between the interaction of Gordy and Brody. Same with Hayes and Carey. Obviously, they're using this to help drum up excitement for the sixth man. And while it did lead to the double DQ after all 4 guys got in the ring and Rick Hazard kind of lost control, you know, they're really pushing these feuds as the main attractions right now. And again, because Gordy's going to be a part of that 6-man tag, it hasn't really been made clear what Brody's involvement's going to be at the Texas Stadium show. I'm still thinking he's going to wind up being Rude's opponent for the world title. But man, the more I see him interacting with Gordy, kind of want to see those two go at it. We'll see what they dish out. Could be saving Gordy and Brody for another day. Again, it's so weird. The shows are like 1983 levels of excitement in terms of everything happening with the on-screen product. But as I've talked about many times, I mean, we know how bad the attendance figures are, and it's only going to get worse over the next several years. I forget what the number was for the third Parade of Champions in May, but I remember it was significantly down from what they did in 84 and even 85. But the build to the show, I mean, I would argue it's a million times better than the build to this 85 stadium show. Maybe it's the roster rotation. Maybe it's the feuds. It's hard to say. What I do know is that once the summer period kicks off, they're about to lose Carey for a long stretch of time because of the motorcycle accident. I think that in particular ended up doing a lot of irreparable damage for the company, and they just could not bounce back from it. You know, we keep stressing the importance of relishing while we still have Carey and Kevin working full-time schedules, because they're about to lose 50% of their top baby faces, and things are about to drastically change in the coming months. We do have Chris coming back pretty soon, so that might make up for it a little bit, but it ain't all sunshine and rainbows. In any case, I think that's all I got for this one. So, as always, I want to thank everybody for checking out the 5 Starr Wrestling Report. We will be back on Monday for another Retro Raw discussion. The rate we're going, I think we still got another 36 weeks before WrestleMania 41. I'm just going to keep my fingers crossed that if by happenstance I end up doing WWE reviews next year, can we please just pray to the love of God that WrestleMania is the first week of April? Because pushing it back to mid-April is torturous. Just elongating it for the sake of elongating it. Ugh. And anyway, we'll see you guys on Monday, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Take care, all. Peace out.